Okay, after taking a lengthy break, hopefully my nose and my throat and all that are good to go for a good chunk of reading. I would like to knock out an hour of reading at least this time around. I also noticed that I have my special straw here. It's not technically my straw. I feel bad that I never returned it, but in the spirit of things, I do feel like it adds more fizz. So I'm glad that I have it here with me. And because this is how we start all of these, you'll notice over here we have a corgi wearing a fez because fezzes are cool. And joining us is my little Naruto plush. You know what? I have him hold on to the special straw. So we're on 9. So yeah, 9. Kath had an hour or so to kill before she left for Omaha, and she didn't feel like sitting in her room. It was the best kind of November day. Cold and crisp, but not quite freezing, not icy, just cold enough that she could justifiably wear all her favorite clothes, cardigans and tights and leg warmers. She thought about going to the Union to study, but decided to walk around downtown Lincoln instead. Kath almost never left campus. There wasn't much reason to. Leaving campus felt like crossing the border. What would she do if she lost her wallet or got lost? She'd have to call the embassy. Lincoln felt a lot more like a small town than Omaha. There were still movie theaters downtown and little shops. Kath walked by the Thai restaurant and the famous Chipotle. She stopped to walk through a gift shop and smell the essential oils. There was a Starbucks across the street. She wondered if it was like Levi's Starbucks, and a minute later she was crossing over. Inside it was like every other Starbucks Kath had ever been to. Maybe with a few more professorial types and with Levi briskly moving behind the espresso machine, smiling at something, or smiling at something somebody was saying in his headset. Levi was wearing a black sweater over a white t-shirt. He looked like he'd just gotten a haircut, shorter in the back, but still sticking up and flopping all over his face. He called out someone's name and handed a drink to a guy who looked like a retired violin teacher. Levi stopped to talk to the guy because he was Levi, and that this was his biological necessity. "Are you in line?" a woman asked Kath. "No, go ahead." But then Kath decided she may as well get in line. It's not like she'd come here to observe Levi in the wild. She didn't know what she was doing here. "Can I help you?" the guy at the register asked. "No, you cannot," Levi said, pushing the guy down the line. "I got this one." He grinned at her. "Cather." "Hey," Kath said, rolling her eyes. She hadn't thought he'd seen her. "Look at you, all sweatered up. What are those? Leg sweaters? They're leg warmers. You're wearing at least 4 different kinds of sweater. This is a scarf. You look tarred and sweatered." "I get it," she said. "Did you stop by just to say hi?" "No," she said. He frowned. He rolled her eyes again. "I came for coffee." "What kind?" "Just coffee. Grande coffee." "It's cold out. Let me make you something good." Kath shrugged. Levi grabbed a cup and started pumping syrup into it. She waited on the other side of the espresso machine. "What are you doing tonight?" he asked. "You should come over." "I think we're going to have a bonfire. Reagan's coming." "I'm going home," Kath said. "Omaha." "Yeah?" Levi smiled at her. The machine made a hissing noise. "I bet your parents are happy about that." Kath shrugged again. Levi heaped whipped cream onto her drink. His hands were long and thicker than the rest of him, a little knobby with short, square nails. "Have a great weekend," he said, handing her the drink. "I haven't paid yet." Levi held up his hands. "Please, you insult me." "What's this?" She leaned over the cup and took a breath. "My own concoction. Pumpkin spice mocha breve. Light on the mocha. Don't try to order it from anyone else. It'll never turn out the same." "Thanks," Cass said. He grinned at her again, and she took a step backwards into a shelf full of mugs. Bye, she said. Levi moved on to the next person, smiling as wide as ever. Kath's ride was a girl named Erin uh, who'd put up a sign in the floor bathroom about splitting gas back in Omaha. She talked about was her boyfriend who still lived in Omaha and who was probably cheating on her. Kath couldn't wait to go home. She felt a surge of optimism as she ran up the steps to her house. Somebody had raked the leaves. People who stayed up all night making mountains out of mashed potatoes rarely had the presence of mind for leaf raking. Not that her dad would actually do that. The mashed potato thing, that wasn't his style at all. A fireman's pull to the attic, spur of the moment road trips, staying up for 3 nights because he discovered Battlestar Galactica on Netflix. That was the MO of his madness. Dad? The house was dark. He should be home by now. He said he would come home early. Yeah, he was in the kitchen. She ran forward to hug him. He hugged her back like he needed it. Uh, when uh, when when she pulled away, he smiled at her, a sight for sore eyes and everything. It's dark in here, she said. Her dad looked around the room like he just got there. You're right. He walked around the main floor, flipping on lights. When he started on the lamps, Kath switched them off behind him. I was just working on something, he said. For work? For work. He agreed. Absent-mindedly turned off the lamp. Turning on a lamp she just switched off. How do you feel about gravioli? I like it. Is that what we're having for dinner? No, that's the client I'm on. You guys got gravioli? Not yet. It's a pitch. How do you feel about it? About gravioli? Yeah. He tapped the middle fingers of his left hand against his palm. I like the gravy and the ravioli, and it makes you feel full. That's terrible, Kath. Uh, happy, indulgent, comforted, doubly comforted because I'm eating two comfort foods at once? Maybe, he said. It makes me wonder what else would be better with gravy. Ha, he said. Possible. He started walking away from her. And he started walking away from her, and she knew he was looking for his sketchbook. What are we having for dinner? Kath asked. Whatever you want, he said. Then he stopped and turned to her like he was remembering something. No, taco truck. Taco truck? Yes, I'm driving. I haven't driven in months. Which one should we go to? Let's go to the mall. There are at least 7 taco trucks just in a 2-mile radius. Bring it on, she said. I want to eat burritos from now until Sunday morning. They ate their burritos and watched TV. Her dad scribbled and Kath got her laptop. Ren should be here with her laptop too, sending Kath instant messages instead of talking. Kath decided to send Ren an email. I wish you were here. Dad looks good. I don't think he's done dishes since we left, or that he's used any dishes other than drinking glasses, but he's working. And nothing is in pieces, and his eyes are in his eyes, you know? Anyway, see you Monday. Be safe. Try not to let anyone roofie you. Kath went Kath went to bed at 1 o'clock. She came back down at 3 to make sure the front door was locked. She did that sometimes when she couldn't sleep. When things didn't feel quite right or settled, her dad had papered the living room with headlines and sketches. He was walking around them now. He was looking for something. Bed? She said. It took a few seconds for his eyes to rest on her. Bed, he answered, smiling gently. When she came back down at 5, he was in his room. She could hear him snoring. Her dad was gone when uh, her dad was gone when she came downstairs later that morning. Kath decided to survey the damage. The papers in the living room had been sorted into sections. Buckets, he called them. They were taped to the walls and the windows. Some pieces had other papers taped around them, as if the ideas were exploding. Kath looked over all his ideas. Kath looked over all his ideas and found a green pen to star her favorites. She was green. Ren was red. The sight of it, chaotic but still sorted, made her feel better. A little manic was okay. A little manic paid the bills and got him up in the morning and made him magic when he needed it most. I was magic today, girls, he'd say after a big presentation, and they'd both know what it meant. That meant Red Lobster for dinner with their own lobsters and their own candle warm dishes to of drawn butter. A little manic was that a little manic was what their house ran on. The goblins spinning gold in the basement. A Kath checked in the kitchen. The fridge was empty. The freezer was full of healthy choice meals and Marie Calendar pot pies. She loaded the dishwasher with dirty dishes, spoons, and coffee cups. The bathroom was fine. Kath peeked into her dad's bedroom and gathered up more glasses. There were papers everywhere in there, not even in piles. Stacks of mail, most of it unopened. She wondered swept into everything, if he'd just swept everything into his room before she got home. She didn't touch anything but the dishes. Then she microwaved a healthy choice meal, ate it over the sink, and decided to go back to bed. Her bed at home was much softer than she'd ever appreciated, and her pillow smelled so good. And she had missed all their Simon and Baz posters. There was a full-size cutout of Baz, baring his fangs and smirking, hanging from the rail in Cass' canopy bed. She wondered if Reagan would tolerate it in their dorm room. Maybe it would fit in Cass' closet. She and her dad ate every meal that weekend at a different taco truck. Kath had carnitas and barbacoa, al pastor, and even lengua. She ate everything drenched in green. Uh, oh God, I don't know if I can pronounce that. She ate everything drenched in green tomatillo sauce. Her dad worked, so Kath worked with him, logging more words on Carry On Simon than she'd written in weeks. On Saturday night, she was still wide awake at 1 o'clock, but she made a big show of going to bed so that her dad would too. Then she stayed up an hour or two more writing. It felt good to be writing in her own room, in her own bed. To get lost in the world of mages and stay lost. To not hear any voices in her head but Simon and Baz's, not even her own. This was why Kath wrote fic. For hours when their world supplanted the real world. When she could just ride her feelings for each other like a wave, like something falling downhill. By Sunday night, the whole house was covered in onion skin sketch paper and burrito foil. Kath started another load of drinking glasses and gathered up all the delicious smelling trash. She was supposed to meet her ride out in West Omaha. Her dad was waiting by the door to take her, rattling his car keys against his leg. Kath tried to take a mental picture of him to reassure herself with later. He had light brown hair, he had light brown hair, just Kath and Ren's color, just their texture too, thick and straight. A round nose, just wider and longer than theirs. Every no color eyes, just like theirs. It was like he had them. It was like he had them by himself all along. Like three of them had just split their DNA evenly. It would be a much more reassuring picture if he didn't look so sad. His keys were hitting his leg too hard. I'm ready, she said. Kath, the way he said it made her heart sink. Sit down, okay? There's something I need to tell you real quick. Why do I have to sit down? I don't want to have to sit down. He motioned towards that iron table. Please. Kath sat at the table, trying not to lean on his papers or breathe them into disorder. I didn't mean to say this, he said. Just say it, Kath said. You're making me nervous, worse than nervous. Her stomach was twisted up to her trachea. I've been talking to your mom. What? Kath would have been less shocked if he had told her he'd been talking to a ghost or a yeti. Why? What? Not for me, he said quickly, like he knew that the two of them getting back together was a horrifying prospect. About you. Me. You and Ren. Stop, she said. Don't talk about us. Don't talk to her about us. Kath, she's your mother. There's no evidence to support that. Just listen, Kath. You don't even know what I'm going to say. Kath was starting to cry. I don't care what you're going to say. Her dad decided to just keep talking. She'd like to see you. She'd like to know you a little better. No. Honey, she's been through a lot. No, Cass said. She's been through nothing. It was true. You name it. Cass' mom wasn't there for it. Why are we talking about her? Kath could hear her dad's keys bang against his leg again, hitting the bottom of the table. They needed they needed Ren here now. Ren didn't twitch or cry. Ren wouldn't let him keep talking about this. She's your mother, he said, and I think you should give her a chance. We did. When we were born, I'm done talking about this. Kath stood up too quickly, and a pile of papers fluttered off the table. Maybe we can talk about it more at Thanksgiving, he said. Maybe we can not talk about it more at Thanksgiving so that we don't ruin Thanksgiving. Are you going to tell Ren? I already did. I sent her an email. What did she say? Not much. She said she'd think about it. Well, I'm not thinking about it, Cass said. I can't even think about this. She got up from the table and started gathering her things. She needed something to hang on to. He should have shouldn't have talked to them about this separately. He shouldn't have talked to them about it at all. The drive to West Omaha with her dad was miserable, and the drive back to Lincoln without him was worse. Nothing was going right. They'd been attacked by a venomous, crested woodfowl, and then they'd hidden in the cave with the spiders and the whatever that thing was that had bitten Simon's tennis shoe, possibly a rat. And then Baz had taken Simon's hand, or maybe Simon had taken Baz's hand. Anyway, it was totally forgivable because woodfowl and spiders and rats. And sometimes you held somebody's hand just to prove that you were still alive and that another human being was there to testify to that fact. They'd walked back to the fortress like that, hand in hand, and it would have been okay. It would have been mostly okay if one of them had just let go. If they hadn't stood there on edge of the great lawn, holding holding this little bit of each other long after the danger had passed. From The Wrong Idea, posted January 2010 by fanfics author Magicath. Ten. Professor Piper wasn't done grading their unreliable narrator scenes, which made Nick crabby and paranoid, but the professor wanted them to get started on their final project, a 10,000 word short story. Don't save it until the night before, she said, sitting on her desk and swinging her legs. It will read like you wrote it the night before, and I'm not interested in a stream of consciousness. I'm not interested in a stream of consciousness. Kath wasn't sure how she was going to keep everything straight in her head. The final project, the weekly writing assignments on top of all her other classwork for every other class. All the reading, all the writing, the essays, the justifications, the reports, plus Tuesdays and sometimes Thursdays writing with Nick, plus carry on, plus email and notes and comments. Kath felt like she was swimming in words, drowning in them sometimes. Do you ever feel, she asked Nick Tuesday night, like you're a black hole, a reverse black hole, something that blows instead of sucks, something that sucks out, she tried to explain. She was sitting at their table in the stacks with their head resting on her backpack. She could feel the indoor wind on her neck, a reverse black hole of words. So, the world is sucking you dry, he said, of language. Not dry, not yet, but the words are flying out of me so fast I don't know where they're coming from. And maybe you've run through your surplus, he said gravely. And now they're made of bone and blood. Now they're made of breath, she said. Nick looked down at her, his eyebrows pulled together in one thick stripe. His eyes were that color you couldn't see in the rainbow. Indigo. Nope, he said. I've never felt like that. She laughed and shook her head. The words came out like Spider-Man's webbing. Nick held out his hands and touched his middle fingers to his palms. Shh. Kath tried to laugh, but yawned instead. Come on, he said. It's midnight. She gathered up her books. Nick always took the notebook. It was his notebook after all, and he'd worked on the story between library dates or meetings or whatever those were. When they got outside, it was much colder than Kath was expecting. See you tomorrow, Nick said as he walked away. Maybe Piper will have our papers done. Kath nodded and got out her phone to call her room. Hey, someone said softly. She jumped back. It was just Levi, leaning against the lamppost like the archetypical man leaning against a lamppost. You're always done at midnight, he smiled. I thought I'd beat you to the punch. Too cold out here to stand around waiting. Thanks, he said, walking past them towards the dorms. Levi was uncharacteristically quiet. So that so that's your study partner? He asked once they were halfway to the pond. Yeah, Cass said into her scarf. She felt her breath wet and freezing in the wool. Do you know him? Seen him around. Kath was quiet. It was too cold to talk, and she was more tired than usual. He ever offer to walk you home? I never asked, Kath said quickly. I never asked you either. That's true, Levi said. More quiet, more cold. The air stung Kath's throat when she finally spoke again, so maybe you shouldn't. Don't be ridiculous, Levi said. That wasn't my point. The first time she saw Ren that week at lunch with Courtney, all Kath could all Kath could think was, so this is what you look like when you're keeping a giant secret from me. Exactly the same as usual. Kath wondered if Ren ever was ever planning on talking about. Kath wondered if Ren was ever planning to talk about what their dad had brought up. She wondered how many other important things Ren wasn't telling her. And when had this started? When had Ren started filtering what she told Kath? I can do that too, Kath thought. I can keep secrets, but Kath didn't have any secrets, and she didn't want to keep anything from Ren. Not when it felt so good, so easy to know that when she was with Ren, she didn't have to worry about a filter. She kept waiting for a chance to talk to Ren about Courtney, but Courtney was always around and always talking about the most inane things possible, like her life was an audition for an MTV reality show. Finally, after days, Kath decided to walk to class with Ren after lunch, even though it might make her late. What's up? Ren asked as soon as Courtney was on her merry way to economics. It had started snowing, wet snow. You know, I went home last weekend, Cass said. Yeah? How's Dad? Fine. Good, actually. He's pitching ravioli. Ravioli? That's huge. I know. And he seemed into it, and there was nothing else. I mean, everything seemed fine. I told you he didn't need us, Ren said. Cass snorted. He obviously needs us. If he had a cat, the man would be one bad day away from Grey Gardens. I think he eats all his meals at Quick Trip, and he's sleeping on the couch. I thought you said he was doing good. Well, for Dad. You should come home with me next time. Next time is Thanksgiving. I think I'll be there. Kath stopped. They were almost to Ren's class, and Kath hadn't gotten to the hard part yet. Dad told me that he'd already told you. Ren exhaled like she knew something was coming. Yeah, she said you were thinking about it. I am. Why? Kath tried really hard to say it without whining. Because. Ren hitched up her backpack. Because she's our mom, and I'm thinking about it. But it wasn't that Kath couldn't think of an argument. It was that there were so many. The arguments in her brain were like a swarm of people running around from a burning building and getting stuck in the door. But she'll just mess everything up. She's already messed everything up, Ren said. It's not like she can leave us again. Yes, she can. Wren shook her head. I'm just thinking about it. Will you tell me if you decide anything? Wren frowned. Not if it's going to make you this upset. I have a right to get upset about things. I just don't like it, Wren said, looking away from Kath up at the door. I'm going to be late. So was Kath. We're already roommates, Baz argued. I shouldn't have to be his lab partner as well. You're asking me to you're asking me to bear far more than my fair share of apple-cheeked protagonism. Every girl in the laboratory sat on the edge of her stool, ready to take Baz's place. That's enough about my cheeks, Snow muttered, blushing heroically. Honestly, Professor, Baz said, waving his wand toward Snow in a just look at him gesture. Snow caught the end of his wand and pointed it at the floor. Professor Chilblains was unmoved. Sit down, Mr. Pitch. You're wasting precious lab time. Baz slammed his books down at Snow's station. Snow put his safety goggles on and adjusted them. It did nothing to dim his blue eyes or blunt his glare. For the record, Snow grumbled, I don't want to spend any more time with you either. Stupid boy, Baz sighed to himself, taking in Snow's tense shoulders and the flush of anger and his neck with the thick fall of bronze hair partially trapped in his goggles. What do you know about want? From 5 times Baz went to chemistry and 1 time he didn't. Posted August 2009 by fanfics.net authors Magicath and Renegade. 11. The hallway was perfectly quiet. Everyone who lived in Pound Hall was somewhere else, having fun. Cass stared at her computer screen and heard Professor Piper's voice again in her head. She kept forcing herself to remember the entire conversation, playing it back and playing it back and playing it back all the way through, forcing a finger down her memories through. Today, at the beginning of class, Professor Piper had passed their unreliable narrator scenes back. Everybody's but Kath's. We'll talk after class, okay? The professor said to Kath with that gentle, righteous smile she had. Kath had thought this exception must be a good thing, that Professor Piper must have really liked her story. She really liked Kath, you could tell. Kath got more of those soft smiles than just about anybody else in the class, more than Nick by far. And this scene was the best thing Kath had written all semester. She knew it. Maybe Professor Piper wanted to talk about the piece in more detail, or maybe she was going to talk to Kath about taking her advanced class next semester. You have to have special permission to register, or maybe just something good, something. Kath, Professor Piper said when everybody else was gone, and Kath had stepped up to her desk. Sit down. Professor Piper's smile was softer than ever, but it was all wrong. Her eyes were sad and sorry, and she handed Kath her paper. There was a small red F written in the corner. Kath's head whipped up. Kath, Professor Piper said, I don't know what to make of this. I really don't know, but what were you thinking? But Kath said, was it that bad? Could her scene really have been that much worse than everybody else's? Bad or good isn't the point. Professor Piper shook her head, and her long, wild hair swayed from side to side. This is plagiarism. No, Cass said. I wrote it myself. You wrote it yourself? You're the author of Silent Snow and The Mage's Heir? Of course not. Why was Professor Piper saying this? These characters, this whole world belongs to someone else. But the story is mine. The characters and the world make the story, the older woman said. Like she was pleading with Kath to understand. Not necessarily. Kath could feel how red her face was. Her voice was breaking. Yes, Professor Parker said. Necessarily, if you ask to write something original, you can't just steal someone else's story and rearrange the characters. It's not stealing. What would you call it? Borrowing? Kath said, hating that she was arguing with Professor Piper and not even wanting to make Professor Piper's face look this cold and closed, but not able to stop. Repurposing, remixing, sampling, stealing. It's not illegal, and all the arguments came easily to Kath. They were the justification for all fanfiction. I don't own the characters, but I'm not trying to steal them or sell them either. Professor Piper just kept shaking her head, more disappointed than she had ever seemed a few minutes ago. She ran her hands along her jeans. Her fingers were small. She was wearing a large, narrow turquoise ring that jutted out over her knuckle. Whether it's legal is hardly relevant. I asked you to write an original story. You, and there's nothing original here. I just don't think you understand, Cass said. It came out came out of a sob. She looked down at her lap, ashamed, and saw the red F again. I don't think you understand, Kath, the professor said, her voice deliberately calm, and I really want you to. This is college. What we do here is real. I've allowed you into an upper level course, and so far you've greatly impressed me. But this was an immature mistake, and the right thing for you to do now is learn from it. Kath locked her jaw closed. She still wanted to argue. She'd worked so hard on this assignment. Professor Piper was always telling them to write about something close to their hearts, and there was to Cass than uh, nothing closer to Kath's heart than Baz and Simon. But Kath just nodded and stood up. She even managed to a meek thank you on the way out of the classroom. Thinking about it now again made the skin on Kath's face feel scorched clean. She stared at the charcoal drawing of Baz pinned up behind her laptop. She was sitting on a carved black throne, one leg draped over its arm, his head tilted forward languid languid challenge. The artist had written along the bottom of the page in perfect calligraphy, Would you want would you who would you be without me, Snow? A blue-eyed virgin who'd never thrown a punch. And below that, the in, inimitable, I feel like I pronounced that wrong, Magic Kath. Kath picked up her phone again. She called Ren at least 6 times since she left the class. Every time the call went straight to voicemail. Every time Kath hung up. If she could just talk to Ren, she would feel better. Ren would understand probably. Ren had said all the mean stuff about Baz and Simon a few weeks ago, but she'd been drunk. If Ren knew how upset Kath was right now, she wouldn't be a bitch about it. She'd understand. She'd tug Kath back from the edge. Ren was really good at that. If Ren were here, Kath laughed. It came out like a sob. What the F, she thought. Why is everything coming out like a sob? If Ren were here, she'd call an emergency Kanye party. First, she'd stand on the bed. That was the protocol back home. When things were getting too intense, when Ren found out that Jesse Sandoz was cheating on her, when Kath got fired because her boss at the bookstore didn't think she smiled enough, when their dad was acting like a zombie and wouldn't stop. One of them would stand on her bed and pretend to pull an imaginary lever, a giant switch set in the air, and shout, Emergency Kanye party. And then it was the other person's job to run the computer and start the emergency Kanye playlist. And then when they both jumped around and danced and shout Kanye West lyrics until they felt better, sometimes it would take a while. I'm authorized to call an emergency Kanye party, Kath thought to herself, laughing again. This time it came out slightly more like a laugh. It's not like I need a quorum. She reached toward her laptop and opened her Kanye playlist. There was portable speakers in one of her drawers. She got them out and plugged them in. Then she turned the volume all the way up. It was Friday night. There was nobody in the building. Maybe nobody on campus to disturb. Emergency Kanye party. Kath climbed onto her bed to announce it, but stepped right down. It felt silly and pathetic. Is there anything more pathetic than a one-person dance party? She stood in front of the speakers instead and closed her eyes, not really dancing, just bouncing and whispering the lyrics. After the first verse, she was dancing. Kanye always crawled right under her skin. He was the perfect antidote to any serious frustration. Just enough angry, just enough indignant, just enough the world will never know how ridiculously awesome I am. Just enough poet. With her eyes closed, Kath could almost pretend that Ren was dancing on the other side of the room, holding a Simon Snow replica wand for a microphone. After a few songs, Kath didn't need to pretend. If If any of her neighbors had been home, they wouldn't have heard her shouting the lyrics. Kath danced and rapped and danced, and eventually there was knocking. Damn, maybe the neighbors are home. She opened the door without looking, without turning down the music. Kanye impaired thinking, but ready to apologize. It was just Levi. Reagan isn't here, Kath shouted. He said something, but not loud enough. What? She yelled. Then who's here? Levi shouted, smiling. Levi, always smiling, wearing a plaid flannel shirt with the sleeves unbuttoned at the wrist, couldn't even be trusted to dress himself. Who's in there, listening to rap music? Me, Cass said. She was panting, trying not to pant. He leaned toward her so that he wouldn't have to shout. This can't be Catherine music. I'd always pegged you as the mopey indie type. He was teasing her. Only genuine emergencies were allowed to interrupt the emergency Kanye party. Go away. Cass started to shut the door. Levi stopped it with his hand. What are you doing? He said, laughing. Pushed his head forward on the on the doing. She shook her head because he couldn't think of anything reasonable to say, and because it wouldn't matter anyway. Levi was never reasonable. Emergency dance party. Go away. Oh no, Levi said, pushing the door open and sliding in. Too skinny, too tall. Cass shut the door behind him. There was no protocol for this. She called Wren for a sidebar consultation if there was any chance Wren would answer her phone. Levi stood in front of Kath, his face serious, for once. Seriously, for once. And his head deliberately bobbing up and down. So, he said loudly, emergency dance party. Kath nodded, and nodded, and nodded. Levi nodded back. And then Kath started laughing, rolled her eyes away from him, moved her hips side to side, just barely, and then her shoulders, and then she was dancing again, tighter than before. Her knees and elbows were almost locking, but dancing. When she looked back at Levi, he was dancing too, exactly the way she would have imagined him dancing if he ever tried. Too long, too loose, running his fingers through his hair. Dude, we get it. Extreme widow's peak. His eyes were absolutely gleaming with mirth, putting out light. Kath couldn't stop. Levi caught her eyes and laughed too. And then he was actually dancing with her. Not close or anything, not any closer. Yeah. Then he was dancing with her. Not close or anything, not any closer actually, just looking at her face, moving with her. And then she was dancing with him. Better, better than him, which was nice. She realized when she was biting her bottom lip and stopped. She started rapping instead. Kath could blow these songs backwards. Wait. Kath could blow these songs backwards. Levi raised his eyebrows and grinned. He knew the chorus and rapped with her. They danced into the next song and through it and into the next. Levi stepped toward her, maybe not even on purpose, and Kath whirled up onto the bed. He laughed and jumped onto Reagan's, practically bumping his head on the ceiling. They kept dancing together, imitating each other's goofiest moves, at bouncing at the end of the beds. It was almost like dancing with Ren, but not, of course. Really, really not. And then the doors swung open. Kath jumped back from it and fell flat on her mattress, bouncing and rolling onto the floor. Levi was laughing so hard he had to lean against the wall with both hands. Reagan walked in and said something, but Kath didn't catch it. She reached up to her desk and closed the laptop, stopping the music. Levi's laughter rang out in the sudden quiet. Kath was completely out of breath, and she landed on wrong on her knee. What the major fuck? Reagan said, more shocked than angry. At least Kath didn't think she seemed angry. Emergency dance party, Levi said, jumping off the bed and reaching out to help Kath. Kath held onto the desk and stood up. Okay, he asked. He smiled and nodded at her. Have you met Cather? Levi said to Reagan, his face still shining with amusement. She spits hot fire. This is exactly the sort of day I'm having, Reagan said, setting down her bag and kicking off her shoes. Weird shit around every corner. I'm going out. You coming? Sure, Levi turned to Kath. You coming? Reagan looked at Kath and frowned. Kath felt something sticky blooming again in her stomach. Maybe the scene with Professor Piper was coming back to her, or maybe she shouldn't have been dancing with her roommate's boyfriend. You should come, Reagan said. She seemed sincere. Kath tugged at the hem of her t-shirt. Nah, it's already late. I'm just gonna write. She reached for her phone out of habit and checked it. She'd missed a text message from Ren. At Muggsy's. Come now. 911. Kath checked the time. Ren had texted her 20 minutes ago while she and Levi were dancing. She set her phone on her desk and started putting her boots on over her pajama over yeah and started putting her boots on over her pajama pants. Is everything okay? Levi asked. I don't know. Kath shook her head. She felt ashamed again and scared about and scared. Her stomach seemed thrilled to have something new to twist about. What's Muggsy's? It's a bar, he said, near East Campus. What's East Campus? Levi reached, Levi reached around her and picked up her phone. He frowned at the screen. I'll take you. I've got my car. Take her where? Reagan asked. Levi tossed her Cass phone and put on his coat. I'm sure she's fine, Reagan said, looking at the text. She's probably just had too much to drink. Mandatory freshman behavior. I still have to go get her, Cass said, taking back the phone. Of course you do, Levi agreed. 911 is 911. He looked at Reagan. You coming? Not if you don't need me. We're supposed to meet Anna and Matt. I'll catch up with you later, he said. Kath was already standing by the door. Your sister's fine, Kath, Reagan said almost, but not quite gently. She's just being normal. Levi's car was a truck, a big one. How did he afford the gas? Kath didn't want any help getting in, but the running board was missing, and it was an especially shitty truck. She noticed now that she was up close and she wouldn't have to climb in on all fours if he hadn't taken her elbow. The cab smelled like gasoline and roasted coffee beans. The seatbelt was stuck, but she'd managed to get it buckled. Levi swung into his seat smoothly and smiled at her. He was trying to be encouraging, Kat figured. What's East Campus? She asked. Are you serious? Why wouldn't I be serious right now? It's the other part of campus, he said. Where the AG school is? The Kath shrugged impatiently and looked out the window. It had been sleeting since the afternoon. The lights looked like wet smears on the streets. Fortunately, Levi was driving slow. And the law school, he said, and there are more dormitories and perfectly adequate bowling alley, and a dairy. Seriously, none of this ringing any bells? Kath let her head rest against the glass. The truck's heater was still blowing cold air. It had it had been for half an hour now since the test. Half an hour past 911. How far is it? A few miles, 10 minutes from here, maybe longer with the weather. East Campus is where most of my classes are. Kath wondered if Ren was alone. Where was Courtney? Weren't they supposed to be skinny bitching together? There's a tractor museum, Levi said, and an international quilt education center, and the food in the residence halls is outstanding. It wasn't right. Having a twin sister was supposed to be like having your own washer, your own guardian, built-in best friend. Their dad had bought them shirts that said for their 13th birthday, uh, the, their dad had bought them shirts that said that for their 13th birthday. They still wore them sometimes, though never at once, just to be funny or ironic or whatever. What's the point of having a twin sister if you won't let her look out for you, if you won't let her fight at your back? East Campus is just so much better than City Campus in every way, and you don't even know that it exists. The light ahead turned red. Cass felt the tires spin beneath them. Levi shifted gears, and the truck rolled to a perfect stop. They had to park quite a ways from the bar. The whole street was bars, block after block of them. They're not going to let me in, Cass said, uh, wishing Levi would walk faster. I'm underage. Muggsy never checks. I've never been in a bar. A dozen girls spilled out of the doorway ahead of them. Levi grabbed Kath's sleeve and pulled her out of the way. I have, he said. It's gonna be fine. It's not fine, Cass said, more to herself than to Levi. If it was fine, she wouldn't need me. Levi pulled on her sleeve again and opened a heavy black, windowless door. Cass glanced up at the neon sign over their heads. Only the Uggsy and four-leaf clover lit up. There was a big guy sitting just inside on a stool, reading a Daily Nebraskan with a flashlight. He flipped up the light at Levi and smiled. Hey, Levi. Levi smiled back. Hey, Yakel. Yakel held the second door open with one hand. He didn't look at Kath. Levi patted him on the arms as they walked past. It was dark inside the bar and crowded. People pressed shoulder to shoulder. There was a band playing on a couch-sized stage near the door. Kath looked around. She couldn't see past the crush of bodies. She wondered where Wren was, where had Wren been 45 minutes ago? Hiding in the bathroom, crouched against the wall. Had she been sick? Had she been passed out? She did that sometimes. Who had been here to help her? Who had been here to hurt her? Kath felt Levi's hand on her elbow. Come on, he said. They squeezed by a high-top table full of people doing shots. One of the guys fell back into Kath, and Levi propped him back up with a smile. You hang in there. Or yeah. You hang out there? Here? When Kath asked when they were past the table. It's only douchey like this when there's a band playing. She and Levi moved farther past the stage, closer to the bar. A movement near the wall caught Kath's eye. The way someone flipped back her hair. Uh, Ren, Kath said, surging forward. Levi held her arm and pushed in front of her, trying to clear the way. Ren, Kath shouted over the crowd before she was even close enough for Ren to hear. Kath's heart was pounding. She was trying to make out the situation when Ren, a big guy, situation around Ren, a big guy was standing in front of her, his arms caging Ren against the carpeted wall. Ren, Kath knocked one of the guy's arms away, and he pulled back, nonplussed. Are you okay? Kath was holding a bottle of dark beer halfway up to her mouth, like her arm was stuck there. What are you doing here? You told me to come. Ren huffed. Her face was flushing, and she had drunk, droopy eyelids. I didn't tell you anything. You sent me a text, Kath said, glowering up to the big guy until he took another step back. Come to Muggsy's, 911. Shit. Ren pulled out her phone over her jeans and looked down at it. She had to stare at it for a second before she could focus. That was for Courtney. Wrong C. Wrong C? Kath froze and then threw her hands into the air. Are you kidding me? Hey, somebody said. They both turned. A Friday-looking guy was standing a foot away, nodding his head at them. He curled his lip and grinned. Twins. Fuck off, Ren said, turned back to her sister. Look, I'm sorry. Are you in trouble? Kath asked. No, Ren said. No, no, no. Pretty hot, the guy said. Then why the 911? Kath demanded. Because I wanted Courtney to come quick. Ren waved her beer bottle towards the stage. The guy she likes is here. Dude, check it out. Hot twins. 911 is for emergencies, Kath shouted. It was so loud in here that you had to shout it. It made it way too easy to lose your temper. Do you really think that's appropriate? Kath heard Levi say in his smiling for strangers voice. Fucking twins, man. That's the fantasy, right? Take a pill, Kath, Ren said, rubbing her eyes with the back of her hand. It's not like I actually called 911. You realize they're sisters, right? Levi said, his voice getting tighter. You're talking about incest. The guy laughed. No, I'm talking about buying them drinks until they start making out. Is that what happens with you and your sister? Levi stepped away from Kath toward the guy and his friend. Who 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 fucking raised you? Levi, don't. Kath pulled on his jacket. This happens all the time. This happens all the time? His eyebrows jerked up at the middle, and his eyebrows jerked up in the middle, and he turned on the guy. These two girls have parents. They have a father. And he should never have to worry that they're going to end up in a bar debasing themselves for some pervert who still jerks off to Girls Gone Wild videos. That's not something a father should ever have to think about. The pervy guy wasn't paying attention. He leered drunkenly over Levi's shoulder and Kath and Ren. Ren flipped him off, and he arched his lip again. Levi stepped closer to the guy's table. You don't get to look at them that way just because they look alike, you fucking pervert. Another Freddy guy stepped up, carrying 3 beers, and glanced over. He grinned when he saw Kath and Ren. Twins. Fucking fantasy, the first guy said. Then, before anyone saw him coming, the guy standing next to Ren, the big one who had been caging her in, stepped past Levi and plowed the drunk pervert right in the chin. Levi, looking up at the big guy and grinned, clapping him on the shoulder. Ren grabbed his arm. Jandro. The pervy guy's friends had the pervy guy's friends were already helping him off the floor. Levi took Kath's sleeve and started pushing Jandro into the crowd. Jandro dragged Ren behind him. Come on, Levi said. Out, out, out. Kath could hear the perv shouting curses behind them. Oh, fuck you, flowers in the attic. Levi shouted back. Uh, they practically fell through the floor. They practically fell through the front door. The bouncer stood up. Everything cool, Levi? Drunks, Levi said, shaking his head. Yakel headed back into the bar. Ren was already out on the sidewalk, shouting at the big guy, at Jandro. Uh, was was he her date, Kath wondered, or was he just somebody who threw a punch for her? I can't believe you did that, Ren said. You could get arrested. She hit his arm, and he let her. Levi hit Jandro's other arm in a kind of salute. They were about the same height, but Jandro was broader. A dark-haired guy, probably Mexican, Kath thought wearing a red western shirt. Who's going to get arrested? Someone asked. Kath spun around. Courtney, clumping toward them in 5-inch pink heels. Why are you guys standing outside in this shit? We're not, Kath said. We're leaving. But I just got here. Courtney whined. She looked at Ren. Is Noah in there? We're leaving, Kath said to Ren. You're drunk. Yes, Ren held up her beer bottle. Finally. Whoa there, Levi said, snagging the bottle and dropping it into a trash can behind her. Open container. That was my beer, Ren objected. A little louder there, jailbait. I don't think every cop on the street heard you. He was smiling. Kath wasn't. You're drunk, she said. You're going home. No, Kath, I'm not. I'm drunk, I'm not, and I'm staying out. That's the whole fucking point of being out. She swayed and Courtney's she swayed and Courtney giggled and put her arm around her. Ren looked at her roommate and started giggling too. Everything's the whole fucking point with you, Cass said quietly. The sleet was hitting her cheeks like gravel. Ren had tiny pieces of ice in her hair. I'm not leaving you alone like this, Cass said. I'm not alone, Ren replied. It's okay, Kath. Courtney's smile couldn't be more patronizing or more coated in pink lipstick. I'm here, Han Solo's here. She smiled up flirtily at Jandro. The night is young. The night is young, Ren sang, laying her head against Courtney's arm. I just can't. Kath shook her head. It's fucking freezing out here. Courtney hugged Ren again. Come on. Not Mugsy's, Jandro said, starting to walk away. He glanced back at Kath for a second, and for a second, she thought he was going to say something, but kept on walking. Ren and Courtney followed him. Courtney clumped. Ren didn't look back. Kath watched them walk up the block and disappear. Another broken neon sign. She wiped the ice off her cheeks. Hey, she said. She heard someone say after a cold, wet minute. Levi still standing behind her. Let's go, Cass said, looking down at the sidewalk. On top of everything else that was going Right at this minute, Levi must think that she was an idiot. Kath's pajamas were soaked, and the wind was blowing right around them. She shivered. Levi walked past her, taking her hood and pulling it up over her head. She followed him to his truck. Now that she realized how cold it was, her teeth were starting to chatter. I've got it, she said. I've got it, she said when Levi tried to help her in. She waited for him to walk away before heaving herself up onto the seat. Levi slid behind the wheel and started the truck, cranking up the heat and the windshield wipers and holding his hands up to the vents. Seatbelt, he said after a minute. Oh, sorry. Kath dug for the seatbelt. She buckled up. The truck still didn't move. You did the right thing, you know, Levi. No, Kath said. I don't know. You had to go check on her. 911 is 911. And then I left her, completely wasted, with a stranger and a moron. That guy didn't seem like a stranger, Levi said. Kath almost laughed because he hadn't argued with the moron part. I'm her sister. I'm supposed to look out for her, not against her will. What if she passes out? Does that happen a lot? Kath looked over at him. His hair was wet. You could see the tracks where he'd pushed his fingers through it. I don't want to talk about this anymore, she said. Okay, are you hungry? No, she still looked down at her lap. The truck still didn't move. Because I'm hungry, he said. Aren't you supposed to meet up with Reagan? Yep, later. Kath rubbed her face again. The ice in her hair was melting and dripping into her eyes. I'm wearing pajamas. Levi put the truck into reverse. I know just the place. The pajama pants weren't a problem. Levi took her to a 24-hour truck stop near the edge of town. Nothing in Lincoln was too far from the edge of town. The place felt like it hadn't been redecorated ever. Maybe it had been, or like maybe it had been built 60 years ago out of the materials that were already worn and cracking. The waitress started pouring them coffee without even asking if they wanted any. Perfect, Levi said, smiling at the waitress and shuffling out of his coat. She set the cream on the table and brushed his shoulder fondly. Do you come here a lot? Kath asked when the waitress left. More than I go to other places, I guess. If you order the corned beef hash, you don't have to eat for days. Cream? Kath didn't usually order coffee, but she nodded anyway, and he topped off her cup. He, she pulled her saucer back and stared down at it. She heard Levi exhale. I know how you feel right now, he said. I have two little sisters. You don't know how I feel. Kath dumped in 3 packs of sugar. She's not just my sister. Do people really do that to you guys all the time? Do what? Kath looked at him and he looked away. The twin thing? Oh, that. She stirred her coffee, clacking the spoon too hard against her cup. Not all the time. Only if we're around drunks or, like, walking down the street. He made a face. People are depraved. The waitress came back and Levi lit up for her, predictably. He ordered corned beef hash. Kath stuck with coffee. She'll grow out of it, he said when the waitress walked away from their booth. Reagan's right. It's a freshman thing. I'm a freshman. I'm not out getting wasted. Levi laughed. Right, because you're too busy throwing dance parties. That was, or what was the emergency anyway? Kath watched him laugh and felt like the sticky black pit yawn open in her stomach. Professor Piper, Simon, Baz, neat red F. Were you anticipating an emergency? He asked, still smiling. Or maybe summoning one, like a rain dance. You don't have to do this, Cass said. Do what? Try to make me feel better. She felt the tears coming on, and her voice wobbled. I'm not one of your little sisters. Levi's smile fell completely. I'm sorry, he said, all the teasing gone. I thought maybe you'd want to talk about it. Kath looked back at her coffee. She shook her head a few times, as much to tell him no as to shake away the stinging in her eyes. His corned beef hash came, a whole mess of it. He moved Kath's coffee cup to the table and scooped hash onto her saucer. Kath ate it. It was easier than arguing. She'd been arguing all day, and so far no one had listened. And besides, the corned beef hash was really good, like it was made fresh with real corned beef, and there were two sunny side up eggs on top. A long chapter. Okay. Levi piled more onto her plate. Something happened in class, Cass said. She didn't look up she didn't look up at him. Maybe she could use Big Brother right now. She was currently down a twin sister. Any port in a storm, uh, and all that. What class? He asked. Fiction writing. You take fiction writing? That's an actual class? That's an actual question? Does this have something to do with your Simon Snow thing? Kath looked up, now flushed. Who told you about my Simon Snow thing? Nobody had Ned to tell me. You've got Simon Snow stuff you've got Simon Snow stuff everywhere. You're worse than my 10-year-old cousin. Levi grinned. He looked really relieved to be smiling again. Reagan told me you write stories about him. So Reagan told you. That's that's what you're always working on, right? Writing stories about Simon Snow. Kath didn't know what to say. It sounded absolutely ridiculous when Levi said it. They're not just stories, she said. He took a giant bite of hash. His hair was still wet and falling, wet blondly into his eyes. He pushed it back. They're not? Kath shook her head. They were just stories, but stories weren't just anything. Simon wasn't just. What do you know about Simon Snow? She asked. He shrugged. Everybody knows about Simon Snow. You've read the books? I've seen the movies. Kath rolled her eyes so hard it hurt. Actually, maybe because she still was on the edge of tears, on the edge period, on edge period. So you haven't read the books. I'm not really a book person. That might be the most idiotic thing you've ever said to me. Don't change the subject, Levi said, grinning some more. You write stories about Simon Snow. You think this is funny? Yes, Levi said, but also sort of cool. Tell me about your stories. Kath pressed the Kath pressed the tines of her fork into into her placemat. They're just like I take the character and put them in new situations, like deleted scenes. Sometimes more like what ifs, like what if Baz wasn't evil? What if Simon never found the five blades? What if Agatha found them instead? What if Agatha was evil? Agatha couldn't be evil, Levi argued, leaning forward and pointing at Kath with a fork. She's pure of heart, a lion of dawn. Kath narrowed her eyes. How do you know that? I told you, I've seen the movies. Well, in my world, if I want to make Agatha evil, I can. Or I can make her a vampire. Or I can make her an actual lion. Simon wouldn't like that. Simon doesn't care. He's in love with Baz. Levi, that word. Levi Guffawed. You don't get many opportunities to use that word. Kath thought, but this is one of them. Simon isn't gay, he said. In my world, he is. But Baz is his nemesis. I don't have to follow any of the rules. The original books already exist. It's not my job to rewrite them. Is it your job to make Simon gay? You're getting too distracted by the gay thing, Cass said. She was leaning forward now, too. It is distracting, Levi giggled. Did guys giggle or chuckle? Kath hated the word chuckle. The whole point of fan fiction, she said, is that you get to play inside somebody else's universe, rewrite the rules, or bend them. This story doesn't have to end when Gemma Leslie gets tired of it. You can stay in you can stay in this world you love, as long as you want, as long as you keep thinking of new stories. Fan fiction, Levi said. Yes. Yes. Kath was embarrassed by how sincere she sounded, how excited she felt whenever she actually talked about this. She was so used to keeping it a secret, used to assuming people would think she was a freak and a nerd and a pervert. Maybe Levi thought those things. Maybe he just found freaks and perverts amusing. Emergency dance party? He asked. Right. She sat back in the booth again. Our professor asked us to write a scene with an untrustworthy narrator. I wrote something about Simon and Baz. She didn't get it. She thought it was plagiarism. Kath forced herself to use that word. Felt like the tar wake up. Felt the tar wake up with a twist in her stomach. But it was your story, Levi said. Yes, that's not actually plagiarism. He smiled at her. She needed to come up with more words for Levi's smiles. He had too many of them. This one was in question. They were your words, right? Right. I mean, I can see why your professor wouldn't want you to write a Simon Snow story. The class isn't called fan fiction writing, but I wouldn't call it plagiarism. Plagiarism. Is it illegal? No, as long as I don't try to sell it. GTL says she loves fan fiction. I mean, she loves the idea of it. She doesn't actually read it. Is your professor reporting you? What do you mean? Is she reporting you to the judicial board? She didn't. She didn't even mention that. She would have mentioned it, he said. So, okay. He waved his fork in a straight line between them, holding it like a pencil. This isn't a big deal. You just don't turn in any more fan fiction. It felt like a big deal. Kath's stomach still hurt. She made me feel so stupid and deviant. Levi laughed again. Do you really expect an elderly English professor to be drawn? Uh, eh. Do you really expect an elderly English professor to be down with gay Simon Snow fan fiction? She didn't even mention the gay thing, Cass said. Deviant. He raised an eyebrow. Levi's eyebrows were much more darker than his. Too dark, really, and arched, like he'd drawn them on. Kath felt herself smile, even though she was trying to hold her lips and face still. She shook her head and then looked down at her food and took a big bite. Levi scraped more eggs and hash onto her plate. Sneaking around the castle, staying out all night, coming home in the morning with leaves in his hair. Baz was up to something. Simon was sure of it, but he needed proof. Penelope and Agatha weren't taking his suspicion seriously. He's plotting, Simon would say. He's always plotting. Penelope would answer. He's looming, Simon would say. He's always looming, Agatha would answer. He is quite tall. Not taller than me. A bit. It wasn't just the plotting and the looming. Baz was up to something beyond his chronic giddishness. His pearl gray eyes and his bloodshot and his pearl gray eyes were bloodshot and shadowed. His black hair had lost its luster. Usually cold and intimidating, lately Baz seemed chilled and cornered. Simon had followed him around the catacombs last night for 3 hours and still didn't have a clue. From Chapter 3, Simon Snow and the Five Blades. Copyright 2008 by Gemma T. Leslie. All right. We actually knocked out quite a bit, so I am going to take another small break and I'm going to end this video and I will see you guys around for the next one. So thank you for if you've decided to listen this far.